Welcome. My name is Kelly Riordan. I'm a classical musician turned creative entrepreneur, and this is the best platform for musicians that are looking to shape their career by thinking outside the box.
Sam, Isaac and I have been really looking forward to this and recording this conversation with you. I know seeing firsthand over the last year all the projects that you've been working on has been really exciting, and working with you has been even more exciting. I want to jump into all of that, of course, but why don't we just go way back to the beginning? When did you first pick up a trumpet?
Ooh, going way back. I first picked up a trumpet in 5th grade, so it was when everyone else started band class, and I actually wanted to start playing in, I think it was 1st grade. And I remember asking my parents, I was like, I really want to play the trumpet, and I don't even know why. I think it might have been because my dad listened to a lot of jazz, so he was playing lots of music that had trumpets in it. And we called the teacher, I don't know, it was probably brass bell or something, but my parents called him up and they're like, well, we think he should wait until 5th grade because trumpet's hard. You need some lung power. So unfortunately I didn't get started quite as early as I wanted to, but so I started in 5th grade, and my teacher, Jamie Breivik, who's a fantastic trumpet player in the area, happened to be a jazz trumpet player. So it worked out really well.
That's awesome. And you jumped right into jazz. I think we kind of bypassed everything as much as possible.
Yeah.
little classical experience here and there, but mostly jazz.
Oh, yeah.
So was it just from hearing that growing up that you were really attracted to it? Or was there anything else that really drew you to jazz in particular?
I don't know. I must have been kind of a weird kid because it was like 7th grade already, I think, 6th or 7th grade, and I was listening to my dad's mini disc player. Do you know what those were?
Yeah.
You have one of those? So I was carrying that around. I had my headphones, and I don't know what you call it. It burned a couple like Miles Davis things onto there, and I would just walk around like listening to that. So already at an early age, I was listening to jazz. So I don't know what it was about it. I think now in retrospect, I think I get very passionate and like almost like obsessed about certain things, and I think that was kind of just the first thing that I found. So
that's awesome, and especially to have it speak to you at such a young age. I think people find the performance practice later in life pretty frequently, or kind of evolves over time. So seeing that interest so early, I think, is really unique. Yeah. Now, obviously, you went to school specifically for jazz. Tell us a little bit about what your education looked like and what came next.
So I went to the New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music, is the official long name. So I got my bachelor's degree there, and that school is in New York. And then I went to University of Miami Frost School of Music. Did a jazz performance degree there as well, studied with a great trumpet player, Brian Lynch. Then I went back to New York for a couple of years, and it's kind of like, this is too expensive. I'm going back home. And now we're here.
Nice.
So I'm curious, what led you to choose those schools, and what were the decision factors in doing that?
Good question. Scholarship was big. For my bachelor's, actually, I really wanted to go to Manhattan School of Music. And I did, I can't even remember. I did get in there, but did not get very much scholarship at all. And then New School and Temple University were the two where I had the most scholarship. So it was kind of between those, and they're great schools. But I'm glad I spent the time in New York because I loved it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when you went to school, obviously we'll talk about your career and what things look like now, but what were you envisioning at that time would be your career path or the end game that you kind of had in mind?
Ooh, it's very different from now.
It happens.
I mean, for anyone who's listening to this that's familiar, maybe in jazz or familiar with jazz performer's lifestyle. I wanted basically the stereotypical career of, most people, what they do is after school, or even during school, start gigging as much as possible with, like, as a sideman. So it's all freelance pretty much. And I wanted to work, let's say, next 3 to 5 years out of school as a sideman and learn a lot through gigging with different musicians that way, and then kind of transition to having my own band and being a self-led artist and having my own groups and touring around and stuff. And that quickly changed when I got out of school, and I realized, like, holy moly, like my friends that are somewhat succeeding, and even people that I've looked up to, I'm like, wow, this is one of my favorite musicians, like this would be my dream to, like, perform with this person. And then starting to find out more about what their life is like and career and how difficult it can be, especially living in New York. So kind of backed away from that a little bit. I got a little scared. Yeah.
Was it more of not wanting to tour as much? Was it more of like that? I know gigging can be less stable, especially as you're getting started. Obviously, as things build out and you kind of build up a pretty good book of events, it gets better. But what made you want to back away a little bit more from that lifestyle?
The touring aspect of it was part of it, but probably not the main reason. For me, it was money. It was like it was really hard to see a future where I would be comfortable.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't think about that enough before going to school and even in school. So I don't know. I wish people would would talk about that a little bit more before, like, while you're still in high school. And
yeah. It's a journey too. I think it's something that everyone has to find for themselves. And we were talking before we started recording about what it looks like to have that career, and even in classical music, kind of some of the parallels of taking auditions and that process. And it's stressful, I think, in more ways than a regular musician will paint for the public, right? We hide those things, or we want to protect the industry and the career because obviously we love them and we're passionate. So it's kind of a hard thing to talk about, to share that lifestyle and the struggles that come with it. I think at the same time, when we're doing really, really well, we forget about all the hard things that we did to get there too. And we're kind of on the peak. And so that's what you talk about.
But also, like, I'm curious what your experience was, but in high school, when I was just so obsessed with jazz music, and not just performing, but like listening to it, and oh my God, Kenny Dorham, Miles, like these people that I listened to and were my favorite artists. I wanted to be like them almost, or have like that same career. And for some reason, I'm not sure why exactly, but for some reason it didn't click that jazz is not very popular anymore. Like, that's just the reality. Like, there's this one YouTube video where they kind of track the popularity of music genres throughout years, and I don't know how accurate that is, but it like you see in the 30s and 40s and stuff, jazz is at the peak, like the most popular by far, and now it's not on the charts. So just the reality of that in terms of the size of the market and like what that means for record deals and everything as a whole, it's much different.
Yeah, it is complicated. Yeah. So yesterday, Stanley Drucker passed, who's the principal clarinet for the New York Phil for forever. I mean, he had a storied career, but his parents, we were reading his biography last night and some kind of obituary articles and describing his career. His parents put a clarinet in his hand at age 10 because they loved Benny Goodman, because that was the 30s, 40s, and they said, here you go. This is what we want for you. It's better than what we're doing, and so you should just give it a shot. And a lot comes from that. But it's hard. This industry is shifting. And so there's a lot of new developments, which is a lot of the things that you're working on now, especially music technology. So tell me a little bit about how Trumpet Warmup got started and what that looks like, because that's, I know, been a big project for you in the last few years.
Yeah. Sure. So Trumpet Warmup, I guess I'll just say a little bit about what it is first.
Please do.
So it's a subscription website where trumpet players can, like, of any level, can practice along with the videos and have, basically like a practice partner. So you go back and forth with the videos, and it makes your daily practice sessions easier. And where it started, I was like, I wanted that for myself. And at the time, this was a year or two before launching, but when I started to get the idea for Trumpet Warmup, I was using this audio recording play along of a James Stamp Trumpet Warmup. And when I was most consistently practicing along with that for a few weeks, that was some of like the best technical improvement. I don't know if that's the best way to explain it, but that I really saw results when I was using that. But the thing is, these recordings are terrible, or are terrible. They still are, and I will go on the record saying that. So it's just these cheesy backing tracks, and like I was searching for something. I was searching for something that's not there, and so I also, at the time, so when I moved back to New York, I had read a book by Tim Ferriss called The 4-Hour Workweek, and that just like inspired me like crazy, like almost too much, where I was like, my eyes just widened. I was like, oh, I can just start a business, and it's really easy, and like, and I can
I'll just be an entrepreneur.
It only takes 4 hours a week.
Exactly. So that kind of got the wheel spinning, and actually that's when I started Noof Designs. But then a couple years later, I was like, wow, like this trumpet play along website needs to exist in some format, and like, why not? I'm just gonna do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that led into this. I know we kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but after school, I know you spent some time in Wisconsin, some time in New York.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of gigging back and forth, and traveling for that. Obviously, I saw some articles in the last couple months even about Trumpet Warmup, but kind of searching back through those, I know there was a lot published around you coming back and doing a lot of performance in the area and bringing friends, and you were doing the lifestyle. You were working on making that work for a while.
A little bit.
But then Noof Designs came along. So was it that book in particular that led you to trying to start creating video content? Okay.
Well, no, not to start creating video content, but what happened after I read the 4-Hour Workweek was like my business idea for Noof Designs was to have an all-in-one place to like brand artists and like have a really easy way for someone to go from zero, like website, social media presence, video content, anything like that, which most of my friends were at that spot.
Yeah.
Like they didn't have anything, or if they did have a website, it was absolutely terrible. I don't know if you saw these Dynamod websites. Have you ever heard? No.
No, I've
oh
never
my
seen
God,
those.
they're so popular with jazz musicians,
Oh,
and
gosh.
they were terrible. It was just like a static rectangle inside of the browser. It was like a Flash website. Anyway,
R.I.P. Flash.
yeah. So I wanted to. I mean, I never fully saw that through in terms of like, I wanted to have like a studio and employees and a team to help like build people a website and give them content in like a week span. So they pay a few $1,000s and they're just like, bam, you got stuff for months. But yeah, that was the first idea. And what it ended up being was a lot. I mean, I did do a couple websites where it was this package deal type thing, and I think they were pretty cool. but it ended up being mostly just video content for someone, like videography, or just a website for someone. But yeah, and I moved back to Milwaukee, and it was a little tougher because there's not as many people in Milwaukee trying to be full-time artists. So
Yeah, I think that's really cool because, you know, you go to school for music and then you kind of look at these projects that you can do. But I'm wondering how you think about things, because are you kind of asking your friends around of you know, what's needed in the marketplace or what people need, or is it kind of like, do you look at yourself and what you would like to have as a musician? How do you kind of, you know, keep up with the trends or find out what's next, like what you can build a project around?
For me, it definitely what I see is needed. That's what I'm super interested in. But also, I remember sometimes it pops up on Facebook. It's like, you made this post 3 years ago or whatever, or 5 years ago. But I do remember making just a post about like testing the idea and saying, hey, would anyone be interested in this? And a lot of people commented. Some people just said, well, how is that different from a label or things like that? But I've never been someone to like not try and not just like, I mean, it's so easy to try it in a very small scale and kind of just snowball from there.
Yeah, and just test something out, right? Because what's the worst that could happen? You could just do another iteration of the idea and kind of pivot and go in a different direction, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is interesting though, because a lot of musicians don't think that way.
A
lot of musicians don't think that way.
Right.
I think it gets, if you get like psychological about it, we think about what we all are brought up in music, and that lesson environment where you practice independently, you prepare something with your style, your musicality, then you come into a lesson and hopefully nicely, but it usually gets torn to shreds, right? And then that happens once a week, and we're accustomed to that. And you don't put something out unless it's performance ready. Now, maybe like that's a classical musician in me too. Like I don't improvise. I wish someone had taught me jazz at a young age. I think I would have really enjoyed it, but I always kind of laugh now that maybe it's too late for me. I'm a little hesitant to try anything new.
No.
Out of my comfort zone someday. But that need for things to be totally ready and done and prepared before we show it off or talk about it, I think holds a lot of people back from posting on social media, asking that question and trying something.
Yes.
Where do you find that strength or that ability to just voice an idea and see what comes back? Is that something that you've practiced over time?
I don't know. I don't think I really practiced that. I think for me, like, I think things started to change after sophomore year in college when I took a web design class. And literally up until then, like, I have not been as interested about anything as I was about music, and then, or even just like taken to it naturally like that. And we're doing the class, and like, I do not know what it was about the code or whatever, but I was just like much more able to understand it and like interested in learning it than everyone else in the class by far. So what I did was just, I ended up making my personal website for like the final project or whatever, and then right after that I was like, I want to make another one. So I asked my friends, and someone was like, yeah, let's do it. My buddy Mike Stephenson, and I don't think that website's up anymore, but I'm still proud of that. Like, it had some cool animations and whatnot, and I think ever since then I'm just like, try new things. And after that it was photography, then videography, then coffee, then like, it just keeps going.
Yeah, speaking of videography, so we're sitting in your studio space right now, which is so cool. How have you built this? I know you've just been kind of accumulating gear for a while, and it was something that has happened over time, but this is most of your career currently. This is where you're spending a lot of your time between Trumpet Warmup, which is also videography, and then creating other videos. How did this happen?
That's a good question. Well, I was renting studios, and I mean, I had the space, so it just kind of made sense. But it was kind of like a COVID project. But also, it was just, I don't know. I think I like to do things myself if I can. So it was like, why am I spending $300 or however much to rent this studio every single time? And not only that, I have to pack up all my gear, bring all my stuff there, bring it back, all that. So I was like, why can't I just do it here? But then it ended up being a lot more difficult, like adding all the insulation, building a wall, and I mean, it's been a slow process, but it's fun.
What inspired you to start the videography in general? Was that something that came from the branding project?
No, so when I was in Miami, I bought my first camera because I was always just kind of interested in photography and videography in general. And when I would watch movies, one of the things I would pay a lot of attention to was the cinematography. So what I wanted to get into first was actually videography, but it's a lot harder. Like, you need more gear usually. There's a bigger upfront cost and learning curve. So it took a few years, but I was doing photography for a couple years and doing some paid gigs for friends and whatnot. So that was kind of the inspiration for that.
That's awesome.
So with Noof Designs, you do a lot of videos for artists, for musicians. Since you started that, how do you think things have changed as far as what artists need? Do you think they need more video? Should they be on different platforms? Like, since you started, what have you seen it shift towards?
Oh yeah. Well, of course they need more video. They don't.
TikTok.
Loaded question.
Elephant in the room, yeah.
I mean, in terms of like hiring a professional, it's tough because for artists, like, really what they need to learn is like how to shoot and edit themselves, and that's what I would suggest in most cases. But definitely like shorter forms of content. So if I were to do something with the artist, say, it's like, how can we do a session of like half a day and then turn that into a bunch of short pieces of content rather than making you one video? Because a lot of people still have, like, when I first started, a really big thing was these studio trail, like someone would record for their album and they say, oh, I need like, this was really popular, is a studio highlight reel, basically.
Okay.
To promote their album, and like, that's not that useful anymore. That's one piece of content.
Yeah.
Like, unless you're gonna put a bunch of ad spend behind that, which maybe that could work, what you really want to do is find a way to engage people like over and over and over again about your album. And so that would be my advice to people. Even right now, I'm not working with a ton of artists, so I haven't been doing that as much. But if I did, that's what I would say is short form content.
It's a really good point. And I think something that I think about a lot is, how can you do something that's already within your current set of habits? So if you're already playing in this style, with this group, how can you create content around what you're already doing, right? So how can you don't want to make it too hard on yourself by doing something absolutely brand new on yourself. Like you mentioned, the studio highlight reel. That might be something that is just kind of has a lot of, friction, and it's brand new, and it might be a little scary for people. But how can you just like document your process, what you're already doing? Yeah. And that's kind of how I think about some of that stuff.
Yeah, but it's really hard for people. Like, even myself, like, I haven't been posting a lot on social media lately, but there's tons of things I could post, but sometimes it feels like there isn't anything, and the only reason is because like you're not just like being vulnerable enough about like what your life is and what your process is as an artist, because like you can literally just be in the practice room and post something, and like it brings people in and gives them more of like an idea of what you're like and how you operate and what it's like to be a musician. So
there's almost this phenomenon right now of the intentional mistake, or like the included mistake in a lot of content. Like people want to see, like on TikTok, for example, they want to see the errors too. Like, you know, we're talking about like a video of sight reading. Like maybe there was a little error, but it's okay. They were sight reading and they said that, and it's kind of fun to hear that and know people aren't perfect. I think at the same time, hearing someone misspeak or make an error in their playing, or like try something a couple different times, try the same lick back to back to back. It's a different window into someone's process that we don't get otherwise. Like, again, if you go back to like, you go to your lesson every single week, all that work that you did in the hours and hours and hours and hours of time in the practice room, you get that one moment to show your teacher what you've practiced. And if you're having an off day, or if it's not great, then that's what we're seeing. Or if we make a mistake in the performance, it feels unexcusable. We're not used to seeing all that all the time. And I think giving more permission for that is helpful, but I think it also allows musicians to try more. But it's a very different mindset. It's not something we're used to. It's how do I put something else on social media that's not done again?
Right. But do you find like in music schools, it's almost this like, I don't know. I found they're almost promoting, a lot of my teachers and stuff, it's like, if you're not focusing on like improving on your instrument and improving your craft, then you're doing the wrong thing.
Oh yeah.
And like, I don't know. I mean,
it's
tough to say that's wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
Did you get flack when you started expressing interest in like web design or anything? Was that something that was pushed aside? No,
because I don't even think my teachers knew about it. I mean, in Miami though, when I started doing photography, I think maybe people were like a little, like, because I would show up to they had these weekly showcase things where a different band would appear, and like basically play whatever they're working on at the time, and I would start showing up with the camera instead of like every other student is there just sitting and like not really focusing. But I was like, I mean, I'm gonna use this time to like get better at a new skill. And I don't know, I mean, definitely some teachers were like, oh well, maybe we could use Sam for photography because that's beneficial to people and to teachers and people in schools. But I do think there was a little vibes of like, oh well, he's not focusing as much on it. His music. But
it's hard. Even when I was undergrad and master's, I had to work through my programs, and I'm glad that I did. Like, it helped me not have as much debt and helped me, I think, in a lot of ways build other life skills and not just work on my instrument. But it did take me out of the practice room, and I think there's a negative connotation around that for a lot of musicians in school, that when you're here, this is the one time you get in your entire life to just focus on your instrument, and that's totally true. But I think that it also creates this weird, a little bit of a weird expectation that we just don't talk about other interests or passions, or you know, if you want to play intramural sports, even like, what if you hurt yourself? You can't do that. Don't do that. You know, like take up swimming instead, or something safer, and not anything that you could be injured, and all that's totally fair. And I see arguments from both sides, but I think it does put a lot of students who aren't singularly focused or want to have a career in music, but that isn't a traditional career path, and they're still figuring that out, puts a lot of people in a box that they can't get out of. And then you leave school, and now what? Like, I just spent all this time and energy on something that I'm not even 100% sure I want to do with the rest of my life, or I don't know how to get there. And they lack those skills.
I think, like, I don't know, that's tough, because I understand that sentiment of wanting to push people to like, that is in a sense what you should be doing. Like if you really want to perform and have that be your entire life, like you gotta focus and you really gotta do that as much as possible. And most people need to be pushed to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the right advice for everyone. And I don't think, like looking back, I don't think that was the right advice for me, at least currently where my career is going and where it's at now. But I don't know. Then on the flip side of that, it's like I did spend a lot of time trying to master one thing, and maybe that is important to pick one thing at first to like try to master, and then when you start applying those like the ability to learn new skills, maybe it makes it easier. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's another thing that a lot of musicians struggle with is like when you're in school, because you're just focused on music, like you're gigging, you're performing, you've got recitals, you've got your lessons, you've got ensembles, you know, maybe you're playing the piece for one of the composers in the program as well, and you've got a lot that you're juggling. And then we leave school, and that's what we're used to. And so I think a lot of musicians, their first reaction in their career is just like spread out a lot. Like, I'm going to take any and every gig in any kind of genre. Yeah. I'm going to take any audition everywhere. I'm going to work at a local music store. And these are all really good options, but I think they pick 6, 7, 8 things. And I think that leads to a lot of the confusion or the burnout or this feeling of chaos in an artist's career in general. Is like you're juggling so many things at one time. It's really hard to focus. Obviously, you've picked a couple things and really, really focused. So what criteria or how are you
focused? I mean,
there's a lot of assumption.
I feel like I have a lot of different interests, so I feel like I don't know. I wrestle with that. I'm not sure if I'm focused or not. But
I think it's a struggle forever. I don't know that it's ever just a clear path of like, I'm only going to do this one thing now. But obviously you've pared things down a little bit. You've got a couple areas that you're more focused in now than others. So what are the projects right now that are getting the most attention from you and that you're the most excited about?
So things are changing fairly quickly, and there's been some new opportunities. So one newer interest of mine has been pickleball. We've talked about it a little bit, but basically my interest in that and connections and people I've met have led to jobs, which I was not really expecting when I started playing pickleball. But it's funny how that works. So like people find out I do video, and you know, one thing leads to another. But I recently have like been part of the crew on a few big pickleball tournaments, and it's growing really, really fast. So there's several opportunities like video related that I don't know, we'll see what happens with that. I might be a little more focused on that this year. And then I do a lot of video editing. So a lot of my time is spent in front of the computer, which is not exactly my preference. I want to get, maybe 20% of my time is video editing rather than 90% of my time. But I do a lot of editing for a company called Lotus Trumpets. And I don't know if I told you this, but I'm joining they're starting a new company called Trumpet Academy, and it's going to be an app, educational app, and sort of like play along stuff's similar-ish to Trumpet Warmup. But so I'm going to be joining their team, and we're going to start filming end of January. So I'll likely be going to Europe for that to film the main owner and amazing trumpet player Adam Rappa. And so I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the next year, but there's like a bunch of different opportunities that it's kind of exciting because instead of just like having to create all these opportunities myself, they're starting to come because I think having such a wide skill set. Like, what's the expression? Jack of all trades. Yeah. I should remember that. Yeah, I think it's useful, and then especially when you like get into something random like pickleball or could be anything. Like I've gotten really into coffee, then you start to make those connections, and I think people realize that you can be really valuable if you have a bunch of different skills to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea for a lot of musicians is like, let's say someone's on the outside looking in and they're listening to you right now just say, yeah, I've got all these people just coming out of the woodwork, or like this opportunity just kind of appears. And I think maybe there's this element that we feel of luck, like it's just falling into Sam's lap. Like, how is he getting those opportunities, those gigs? Like, how is he finding opportunities to play locally, or how are those coming into his life, and why am I not getting any? So if you were going to give advice to someone that's trying to build their career in the performing arts or in this space, what are some kind of overarching pieces of advice that you would give to opening those doors and finding the opportunities?
Opportunities in what? Just anything? Any opportunity?
Oh, I mean, music, I guess, specifically, but you also have had a lot of opportunities
Like
come that aren't music. So how are those coming to pass?
Honestly, I would say number one is learn how to video edit. It sounds kind of weird, but
yeah,
it's like that. I think that is the number one skill for a musician to have that is not playing your instrument. But I mean, I don't know. I don't have good advice for that other than like be patient, because I mean 6 years ago I was like, okay, this next year, that's the one where I like succeeded. And then a year after that, okay, this is the one. But it's like, and it's still a process, but it's 6 years later being out of school, and I'm still figuring it out. But I think patience, honestly. And like I guess the path I've taken is a little different because it's so varied. And like, yeah, you were talking about the entrepreneurial ADHD, and I was thinking, oh God, I kind of have that.
So do I.
But yeah, because like starting Noof Designs and then starting Trumpet Warmup, and then kind of, I don't know, just going in lots of different directions. I think in retrospect, things like success or I guess financial success would have happened a little quicker if I just, for example, said, okay, I'm a videographer now, and that's my main thing. But on the flip side, like, I don't know if the long-term upside is as high. Like, I think there's probably, if I never got into wanting to actually create a business and have more than just like a freelance solopreneur type thing, then probably the ups, there's like a cap to what you can do, you know.
Well, it sounds like too, you know, you do a good job of, you have an interest in something and then you build a skill around it, and then you also find people or an environment to put yourself in. So like with pickleball being the fastest growing sport in America, you found people that connected you to jobs. And with jazz, I mean, we went to high school together, and I remember times where you'd pick me up before school and you were listening to jazz, and I was like, what is this music? I have no idea what this is, but maybe he knows something that I don't, you know. And obviously you've built your skills around that and kind of taken up projects. But you know, how do you like find the right people or network your way into these projects? Or maybe, you know, how could somebody listening to this show, you know, find their way into a certain, you know, kind of explore an interest or project by finding the right people?
Right. Well, I think first step is like to actually, because I don't feel like I started actually making great business connections until like the past year or two, because I was just trying to be a solopreneur and like trying so hard to grind that out. I'm like, I got to do this. I can do this. I can do this. And in retrospect, I probably would tell myself to like try to look for help like a lot more in the beginning and make more connections. I don't have a mentor now, but I would say like find a mentor and just people to help, because you almost always, it seems like you could do like better things, or like, I don't know, not have superpowers, but like more opportunity to succeed if you have a team or people helping you. So I don't know. Other than that, be easy to work with.
Like, yeah, that is huge, because then people want to be around you too, and if doing business together can be fun and enjoyable, like people are going to ask you back and introduce you to the next person, and so on and so on. That's a great point.
It's kind of like when I go to lessons and we were talking about every week ensemble rehearsal and like playing through ensemble music. A lot of the time it was, you just had to be prepared, like be the most prepared person there. You have to know your part. You have to be ready. That's how you get asked for other gigs. That's the expectation, is that if you're there, you are ready to play, you're solid, and you're just like a genuinely nice person and enjoyable person to be around. You'll get more gigs. Those people refer you to other projects. It'll kind of grow that way. But I think you have to be a little bit more forward about it and building those relationships. I know that kind of like the buzzword that we've created over the last couple of years is this idea of like mutually beneficial relationships. Yeah. But that's really all networking is it's not like just meet someone one time and then leave it at that and hope they call you at some point. It's having the conversations like, how could we work together? What could I do to help you? How can I be of support? And talking about what you do. I think a lot of the reason you're getting these opportunities is that people do know and that's what you do, and you're talking about it and open and sharing. I mean, that's how we ended up working on so many projects together in the last year, and Sam even created the intro for this podcast as a result. But that came from you posting on social media and Isaac seeing all the time what you were working on and seeing those updates. We talked about reaching out to you for months before we actually did. We were well aware of what was going on. That was in the back of our minds. We were just looking for the right project, and that came along a little over a year ago finally, and we hit the ground running. But being so willing to share what you're working on and how it can help people continues to attract the right people to you too.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. Yeah, you said it well. I got
you did a
nothing
good
to
job
add
of
to
that. All good. Awesome. So, okay, you've got some cool projects coming up in the next few months, maybe some travel, which is super exciting. What is that going to look like right now as you're building out this app? Is most of your work going to be in video? Are you playing for any of it?
I am not playing for any of it. But yeah, it's mostly going to be video. A lot of editing as well, but I mean, eventually we will build out a team and have someone else do that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, what, like in terms of video, the most interesting stuff to me is anything creative. I mean, in general, like things where I'm actively being creative, like how can we add some cool shots to this? Like, what can we do to make this the best possible product? Like, things where you actively have to, I don't know, I'll keep saying it, be creative, but that's the most interesting to me. So the more time I can spend doing that, the better, and like the happier I'll be. So that's certainly the goal. We'll see how long it takes to get there. But yeah, in the meantime, I'll be editing a lot.
I'm curious about the app, and obviously it's a work in progress. We don't have to go too far into detail on it, but there's been this trend in the last year on asynchronous lessons, which is kind of a industry term. I think a lot of people just call it like a video exchange lesson when they're talking to their students. But this idea of having a pre-recorded library that students can listen to, practice, and then submit a video to their teacher for feedback.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the idea here is creating something that could be used for lessons, or is it more like for a student that maybe doesn't have a teacher, this is kind of a fill-in for them?
I would say more, not so much asynchronous lessons, but we would love to have a social component. So whether that means we're hiring out some teachers that will like review some of your playing, or whether it's like you're just interacting with the other people using the app and getting advice from them. But yeah, mostly it's going to be a library, and then have some sort of play along player built in, kind of like, I don't know if you know this app, iRealby. It's really popular with, or actually, I don't know if that's the name of it anymore.
So, well, it's similar to Smart Music.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, so that's the idea. It's very beginnings, but
oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes and what features we have and whatnot.
That's awesome. I think sometimes people get afraid that this stuff is going to replace us, but I don't think we can ever totally get rid of that teacher aspect. So it's fun to hear how this could pair with that and kind of support students at every stage too.
If anything, there's going to be more opportunity for teachers, you know? If more people get interested, or maybe not get interested, but more people keep playing their instrument like throughout or after high school, then there's more opportunity for teachers, you know?
Absolutely. It's kind of like, do you know what Simply Piano is, the app?
No, I don't.
It's like very similar, kind of like play along, but it's a lot of pop music, and it's specifically just for piano right now. And I've had students when I was teaching piano that would use it for fun in addition to their playing and their assignments. And I think a lot of teachers have a very strong reaction to that of, it's not great for technique, it's not great for a lot of things, but like if you can just get the kid playing, like I'm so happy with that. I will take it. If they're actually practicing, if they're touching the instrument, they're going to get better. Yeah. Who cares? Like we can always supplement it and fix the technique in the lesson. That's what my job is, but it's fun to have that balance.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to be like, I get it when you've trained so much and you're like, okay, well these students have to do it this way, and they got to learn all the proper technique.
That's how I did it. Yeah.
But things change all the time, and like, so I mean, this aspect of technology is moving super slow compared to, we were just talking about AI. Like, how is that going to affect music?
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know. So I think I get that, like worrying about that stuff sometimes, but it's not really I don't think it's a very justified worry. Like there's going to be more and more technology being developed, and the music education industry, in my opinion, is like very behind. Yeah. So I don't know. Well, it's going to come eventually.
You can either run away from it, or you can run alongside of it and work and work it into what you're working on and utilize that technology. I know we went to NAMM this summer, and they have a little AI robot that writes music and performs. Okay. And it looks like a humanoid, like she has different, outfits and everything, like a pop star. It's really, it's pretty interesting, but she was the breakfast entertainment at one point. Like, it's something that a lot of the industry is embracing, is we're going to have this. Let's use it to our advantage. Let's figure out how we can make this something that people are listening to, and if they are going to listen to this, then how can we also employ real humans to make it happen, so that we're all still around this and we all have jobs and we're all still succeeding. I think it's one thing to see that technology and maybe be afraid, and then it's another to say, okay, I don't understand this, but I'm going to learn and I'm going to figure out how to harness it for my own use and benefit. On that note, speaking about video, you've said a couple times that's the best skill that someone can learn. So if someone was going to start videoing themselves, what are some basic things that they might need, or some basic skills they might need to figure out how to acquire?
Yeah, good question. Well, for sure, video editing software is number one. So either Premiere Pro or Final Cut, or I would say stick to those two. And I use Premiere Pro. I find it to be like, I got so quick in it that I can edit stuff real quick. But there's also a lot of good features in it where you can add like subtitles pretty easily, and it'll analyze your voice, and then you just got to change it a little bit. But I would say video editing first and foremost, and like just use your phone. Honestly, just put your phone vertical mode, get in front of a window, and film, and then edit it. Like, it's really simple. And then like if you actually do start to nerd out about it, then go from there. And it's so easy to, like, I've learned almost everything from YouTube and just on the job experience. But I would, like, my first video job, I had 1 or 2 cameras. I borrowed a camera. I didn't even have all the proper tripods. Like, just kind of did it. And a lot of the stuff in preparation for that was, I mean, it was kind of stressful leading up to that. but it's just YouTube. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's there's nothing to stop you from, you don't need permission from someone to say, oh, well, here's how you go and do it, and I'm going to walk you through everything. You just do it. Like, and yeah, YouTube is super helpful. I love it.
That's awesome. Well, and using phones these days, I think the camera is so good. The audio quality is usually so good at this point that you really can get by on that a lot. And there's certainly upgrades that you can make, but it's not necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to go in that direction too, because what's cool about having the iPhone that most people have is, you know, you could take a video or a photo or whatever, and then that kind of like unlocks different opportunities even on a networking standpoint. Like, you could take a video and then tag a company or tag an artist and kind of network that way. Like, you could show up to an event and take a photo, and that's your way of like bringing your value to that experience. And then you could, you know, potentially meet someone or just kind of bring your value in that sort of way. So another, you know, benefit to learning that skill.
Yeah. And if anyone is, sorry, just real quick, if anyone, like, if you do actually, if you're thinking right now, like, well, actually learning video, I mean, I'd be interested in that, then I would say, on your point, is like, just start to do it for other people because they need it so bad. Like, there's no amount of video content that would be like too much for an artist to have.
Yeah.
Like, in general, they just don't have, they barely have anything. Like, you know?
Yeah.
So if you just start to go up to, if you're a musician and you know hundreds of other musicians, start to go up to them and be like, hey, I just got this camera. I'd like to shoot a video for you. And do it for that's my suggestion, is do it for free. And then eventually the paid stuff will come.
Yeah. I think, and kind of what I was going to jump in with too, is just that we've made so many friends on social media and like networked on social media with people that are all over the country, all over the world, that we've never met in person. Some of them we may never meet in person, and that's totally fine. But because they're posting all the time and we're posting all the time, and you get the interaction, you create friendships and a network that way. And we've been invited to podcasts that way. We've had podcast guests that way. We've also done other projects or found clients through a lot of those people, and building out those friendships is important. You just have to be known. Like, that's the basic tenet of marketing, right? And right now, video is a lot of the time the best way to get known, but you have to keep doing it over and over and over again. You can't post like 5 videos and think it's going to work for you.
Well, do you ever have, I think for a lot of musicians they get caught up in like the ego of posting and getting worried about what people will think of them. Do you ever struggle with that? Or
Okay. Yeah, and I think everyone does. I don't think it ever really truly goes away. A good example is like last week we were getting ready to go somewhere, and Isaac stepped out for a few minutes to take the dog out, and I was finishing getting ready, and I just opened up my camera and I had a couple replies on videos from TikTok, and I was like, well, I got makeup on, I might as well just record these right now because I've got nothing else to do, and responded to those and just made I think like 3 quick videos in the span of like 10 minutes and just posted them, and they've done really well and they got a lot of good response. But it's hard for me to do that. I think a lot of the time I feel like I have to be in the right headspace or to be totally on, or, you know, if I start saying something and I don't say it the right way, I'll repeat it a couple times. And, you know, my video editor, I'm totally expecting to fix those things for me, for Isaac. But I think the repetition is what gets you over that, or helps get over that, is the more you're doing it. And this is something I'm actively still working on. I'm not saying that I'm perfect in this in any way, but the more you do it, the more you just try it, the more you record videos for other people, or the more that you record videos of yourself, it just gets easier every time. I think the other reality is we all think everyone is thinking about us all the time. Like, we all truly believe, if I post on social media, what are people going to think of me? Like, what is my old teacher going to think of me when they see that I started a coaching business? What are my peers going to think of me if I start posting videos? And
what if it doesn't get double-digit likes?
Yeah,
what if it doesn't say 10?
Yeah, what if my vanity metrics are horrible? Yeah. Or what if no one sees it, or what if people judge me for it? The honest reality of the situation, and I find this more and more every single day, is nobody really cares about you as much as you care about you. And they never will. And what happens on social media is, if you see something and you don't like it, you just keep scrolling. We all do it. Like, how many things do you see on your social media in a day that you just scroll right by? Like, someone gets a job change, you're like, okay, cool. Like, maybe you throw it a like, or maybe you just keep scrolling. And when those things happen and we post about them, there's like this sense of anticipation. But in reality, nobody is giving it that much thought. Yeah. And if they are, it's because they want to work with you and they like what you're doing. And that's why they're thinking about it. But if someone is going to, like, hate or dislike what you're doing, my rule of thumb is I'm probably not going to hear about it. And that's perfectly fine. If I don't know, then I don't know. And I'm happy to live in my little bubble where I'm creating content that is helping people, that is putting out good advice and good information into the world. And then what I get back hopefully is more positive than negative, and that's all I'm looking for. We had like one, I think we talked to you about this a couple months ago. We had one video on Instagram that went totally viral. And I have a tendency to talk fast, if anyone hadn't picked that one up. I can get ahead of myself a little bit, and I have so many thoughts in my brain that as I'm talking, it can kind of get jumbled. And one of the comments on there was like, this expletive talks to GD fast. And I was like, oh my God, like that one hurt. I think that was like the first like real negative comment that I had ever really got on social media. And I was like, oh, that stings, but also totally justified, like completely justified. I know that we're working on it, but hearing that negativity can be concerning. But I think you have to kind of create this little shield of people on the internet say whatever they want to say because they're behind a screen. And sometimes it's helpful criticism and sometimes it's not. You just have to like siphon through that and figure out what's going to help you and benefit you. But all that to say, the more you practice and the more you do it and the more often you put yourself out there, you just create this kind of tolerance for it. That maybe at first that tolerance is like a little saucer that the second anything bad happens, it just completely bottoms out. But over the years and the months and the more you do it, maybe then it's like a salad bowl, and then it's just like a big whole house full of tolerance that you're not bottoming out every time. You've got plenty of experience built up telling yourself you're going to be okay, even if that video doesn't get 10 likes.
Well, what about also, because I mean, you guys take more of a, I don't know what the right word is, formulaic or like business-minded approach to posting. And I think, not that you have to do that, but I guess I think, does that help you at all? Because, like, I think a lot of people don't really know too much about algorithms and, like, what gets you engagement. So if you don't know about that and you don't know that, like, sometimes a post just doesn't pop off, like, sometimes it does get 5 likes, then I think people get, like, so discouraged from that when it's really... No, you just didn't have the right thumbnail. Like, you know?
Or you posted at the same time as some, you know, like a lot of our clients post in Facebook groups, and I have to tell them all the time, if you post in a group at the same time that someone posts some like controversial political post, you will die. Like the post will not go anywhere because everyone is giving attention to this other thing. And you can't control that. There's no way to predict it. And so what the algorithm like blesses that day on the internet might not always be you, and that's totally fine, but that's part of the repetition is you just have to do it more because eventually you will get some that go well. Yeah,
for sure. I think the frequency helps you get to more quality content because like the way I see it is, you know, we set goals in our business to post X amount of times a week or a month or whatever. And the reason we have those goals is to build up our skills to get to a certain level of content creator or educator, right? Like I think about it in that way. You know, I'm repeating this over and over again to get to a certain level, not necessarily looking at, you know, the algorithm or how many likes or comments. It's more of like a, how can I develop personally, or like as a team, as a company, develop to get our content at a certain quality, because it's hard to compete with stuff on the internet these days. You know, there's ads and there's clickbait and controversy and like the piece of content you mentioned, in my opinion, it got views because there was light controversy involved. I think you said something about a studio policy that not everyone agreed with, and it blew up in the comments. So, I mean, do you want to create that type of stuff? Maybe, maybe not. But the way I see it is you're just building your skills up by doing something over time. And it's kind of like working out or, you know, practicing an instrument. Like if you do it on a schedule, like you're just going to get better at it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think the other thing, and I know, Sam, you probably can speak to this a lot too, as a musician, you are the business. And I think that's something that we don't talk about enough in school. And when you're branding someone as an artist, that is the business. The person is the business. I think it makes social media a little bit scarier because these are such personal brands that now it's not just criticism of the business, it's criticism of me. Like it hurts. It's hard to hear that or you know, take that in, and it makes it scarier to put yourself out there. But when you brand yourself, it has to be genuine. It can't just be, you know, Sam creating a carbon copy of Miles Davis and that's how we're branding another musician. It has to be really, really true to them, their goals, their playing style, their personality. And that takes skill to develop and to feel confident in as well.
To be, what do you mean? To be authentic?
Yeah. And to show up authentically, to like actually show who you are and not just read off of a script or see what one person did on their website and just copy the exact same thing because it looked cool.
Yeah. I suppose, I mean, I guess that kind of goes back to what you're saying about documenting. Like if you're able to just document the process and like not try to be so polished about things, then it's almost maybe that removes some of that time it takes to feel comfortable in front of the camera and I don't know. We all have people that we do follow that it's like when you see it, you're almost always like, oh, I want to check this out. And I would say like to musicians, why not be that? Because it, like, you know that it's very important to post on social media and be active. So like, why not try to just be yourself and be interesting and like have genuine connections with people? Because like you were saying before, you do make friends and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people don't ever get to that point because all they're doing is like watching, and occasionally they'll like or comment a little bit, but they are watching and to some degree like judging what other people do, or like, oh, this person got this opportunity or whatever. And it's like like social media doesn't have to be that. It can be a positive, I mean, not entirely, but mostly positive experience of like interacting with people that you genuinely would want to hang out with or get to know. And you can do that with like, there can be across the world. So I don't know. I have a pretty optimistic view of social media in general compared to
it's refreshing, right?
Yeah. But it's a good tool, and it's something that I think people get in their head about because they see so much negativity. Look, the last couple of years, social media was a cesspool, honestly. I mean, everyone was talking about, you know, ticker counts and the depression of what was happening in the world, and it was stressful and it was exhausting, and it creates this little, I think this like little ball of momentum where someone gets negative and it just kind of all piles on and everyone adds to it and they start posting their negative things. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be able to share that, but there has to be a balance. Like, what if, and in a really perfect, amazing world, all the musicians that are listening to this were also posting their practice schedule and their practice strategies and like their daily lives and what that looked like. So that when they got a job, when they won the audition, it did make sense. Mm-hmm. You saw their process. Like, you saw them practice for months and months and months and months and months preparing for that one audition. And now they got it, and it's awesome, and we can all celebrate because we know how hard they worked for it. What if we all knew it wasn't luck? Because we were seeing the whole process.
Yeah.
Right? But we don't. No one shares that. No one thinks to share it. Everyone's too embarrassed to share it. Yeah. I think there's a couple people that are starting to get there and are on the forefront. But like, when you pick up your phone to create content, it really can just be as simple as saying, like, today was a bad practice day. Like, I'm not feeling it. And if we were all more candid about that, I think it would help everyone succeed.
Yeah. Who's your favorite clarinetist of all time? Or like just one. It could be top 5.
Okay, so my first answer is a little bit cheesy because it was my undergraduate professor, Todd Levy. Okay. And like, to be really, really honest, when I was growing up, so I started clarinet at age 8, and I spent the first maybe 4 years playing clarinet, obsessing about how he sounded. I thought it was just beautiful and warm, like very, very dark tone. I loved it. And he had, speaking of Flash websites, when you would go to his website, the intro was this little shadow version of him playing, kind of overlaid, and he had a few recordings that would kind of loop, and I would put that on to fall asleep. Like, I loved it. It was my favorite. So I met him finally, I think it was in 7th grade, and asked for his autograph, and he was like, no one asked me for my autograph. Like, this is so weird. But I was like freaking out. It was at an honors clinic down in UW Milwaukee. I still have that business card, and I think I'd studied with him for a couple years in college, and I finally brought that business card to a lesson and showed it to him, and he was like, oh my God, it was you. He's like, I thought it was, but I couldn't remember because it had been so many years. So kind of a funny aside. So for a long time, I definitely would say Todd Levy's at the top of my list. I just have always really liked his playing. Beyond that, Sabina Meyer, I think she's just a total rock star. Big female clarinet player, great sound, ridiculously technical. I think maybe that's kind of a cop-out answer because she's super popular, but I do really love her.
Currently active.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, where I was going with that is imagine how cool the people you mentioned are alive and a bit younger, I'm assuming, but like, I imagine, what if Miles Davis had a YouTube channel and you could see him in a practice room or anything. Like, that would be insane. That would be insane. And I think there are people living, like Wynton Marsalis, for example, is a trumpet player who, there's some behind the scenes stuff of him, but it's like, you don't really get an experience of like what his day-to-day is. Yeah. And I think that's more, if you're really wanting to be like one of these people, like if you aspire to be a top performer on your instrument, it's like, think of it in terms of that, I guess I would say, is when you want to have all that stuff documented for not just for other people, but for yourself too, and show what that process was. So I'm inspiring myself to post more.
Talking yourself into it as we go.
Yeah, and I mean, like, to get real deep into it, I guess it's a legacy thing too. Like, you could create something and pick your form of media, but that's going to stick around for longer than you are around. And that could impact other people in the future.
Well, even what you're creating with Trumpet Warmup is so similar to that too, that you're giving that insight into what these really, really talented musicians are doing as part of their daily routine. And Sam Rothstein from the Indianapolis Symphony in his Candid Clarinet series did a video that was his warm-up and what that looked like, and kind of breaking down what that timeline was and how that functioned in the life of a professional orchestral clarinet player. And that was good insight for me, like not knowing what that looked like, or being given warm-ups in college but having no idea what people were spending in their practice time? How much time are they dedicating to that versus other things? How much time do you spend in your etudes versus your solo rep versus, you know, your orchestral, your ensemble rep? That balance is tough. And so having some of that inspiration, I think, is helpful, or even just having that like broken down step by step, here's the routine and here's how to do this routine exactly, is helpful. And it's going to be cool when it's not just for trumpet players. Like when clarinet warm-up comes, hit me up. I'll be super interested, but it's cool to have that.
Yeah, for sure. Cool.
That's awesome. Looking at the next year or two as you're kind of balancing this, you know, partial art career, partial like videographer, general marketing and content creation career, what are you most excited about? Or is there something that you want to learn to kind of keep building this skill set to keep growing?
Ooh. No, I think the next step is like putting these skills to use, and kind of, I think in terms of like social media content creation and, you know, applying everything in that way is like probably the most valuable way I can use my skills right now. So I think it's just going to be applying that, and then next steps for me is like I'm ready to get back into music more. So I'm looking to learn more about music production, and I think that's going to be a perfect way to like not be on the road all the time and still have music be in my life. And I think that will be my next rabbit hole I go down. It's like learning Logic and Ableton and whatnot, and how to record trumpet or different instruments really well in audio engineering. So yeah, that's probably the next thing.
That's awesome. Maybe one of our kind of final questions here is, we talked about the day-to-day warm-up, the day-to-day routine a lot, and how you structure that. So you're working independently. I know every day probably looks totally different. This is, you know where I'm going with this. This is probably not an easy answer, but if we had to kind of give a typical day overview, what does your daily life look like as a music entrepreneur and entrepreneur in general?
I'm trying to get it more routine, especially even this past week. But I play pickleball in the mornings a lot, so we play 6 to 8 a.m. So that's kind of interesting as a musician, because I don't necessarily want to go out and like see shows the night before. I have to go play pickleball at 6. But so a lot of times it's, let's say I do that like 2-3 times a week, just coming back here and do usually like 3 hours of editing or emailing or some type of work, and then lunch break. I mean, try to stay as focused as possible, but sometimes it can be hard working from home.
Yeah.
So definitely in the future, I would love to have like a separate studio or work studio from home, because it's easy to like, I like to clean a lot, so and keep the space clean. So sometimes I'll distract myself with that, and it's like I really do not need to be doing that right now. I should be editing. But yes, I mean, for me it's varied a lot. Like sometimes I edit late at night, like 9 to 11 or midnight or something, and it's not necessarily ideal, but I don't know. I don't see it always being like that. I think it's just a temporary thing. You know, got to get, as a business owner, like you do have certain deadlines, and sometimes you just got to make it work.
And sometimes that inspiration strikes at the most random times, or you get home after going to see a show and it's already midnight, and you're like, yeah, but I just solved that problem in my head on the way home, and I'm going to sit down right now and act on it. It is tough. And it's tough to have that routine, but I think it's helpful kind of building out some of these ideas for people that as they're structuring their own lives, just hearing what that looks like and adding some variety or inspiration there. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any final questions, Isaac?
No, I mean, this was great. I really appreciate this conversation. I thought it was super valuable.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We covered a lot.
Yeah. Cool.
Thanks again, Sam. We really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us through our journey in the last year, and creating a lot of really fire content for us too. It's been awesome, and we appreciate all the support that you've given. Seriously.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on my first podcast ever. So I'm
Many more to
excited. It was a
come.
lot of fun. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks guys.